All right, welcome to this week's live office hours. Casey, it's been a busy day.
Things are good. Yeah, a lot of moving pieces. Yeah, excited to make some announcements to some folks and
Yeah,
hopefully make things a little bit easier for you.
yeah. So, big announcement. Our fourth integration just went live today, which we're very excited about. Um, for us, when I think about how tech should be, I think it should be this amazing open kind of ecosystem, right? Where you're not really pushed into one tool. You pick the tool that works best for you because every tool is kind of different, right? I've said this since we launched Aura. Um, no one software is right for every person. That's just rarely the case because some people have different use cases, different requirements, stuff like that. And for us, we want this amazing open source, not open source, but this open ecosystem. And adding this fourth integration means you have even more options. So we launched with the Boxum integration today, which we're very excited about. Been watching them for a little while, watching that team, kind of seeing how they were building the software. And they were doing all the right things, which is very exciting for us. We don't want to integrate necessarily just with anybody because we want to know that the quality behind the software that we're going to integrate with is good, that the customer service is good, that our users are going to be taken care of if they decide to use that software. And all those things checked out. Cool team, very exciting. So we did something kind of unique. Every integration that we have, all four, are slightly unique in some way, shape, or form. In terms of like what kind of data you can get and stuff like that. And so for this one, it's going to be cost for now. We're looking at adding mins and maxes in the near future. But what's nice is you're able to kind of dictate which type of cost you want. So there's the pretty straightforward average cost. There is the current cost, so the most recent cost, because those can fluctuate. There's also the minimum cost and the maximum cost. So again, everybody's slightly different. And instead of just saying, just get the cost, we're making these things kind of flexible because everybody, again, just slightly different. So yeah, we're really excited. There's a lot of buzz happening on Twitter right now, which we've been kind of jumping into and stuff like that. We are going live with Miles from Boxum later this afternoon. Do a live call as well there. But yeah, we're doing some fun stuff. We love all your feedback on it. If you're already using Boxum, get that integration live. It's completely free, and we want your feedback. What do you love about it? What do you not love about it? We want to make it better. All of our integrations we want to make better. But yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, a lot of different people have different processes, different setups. So that's why providing different costs, imports, and giving you more options is really the goal there, just making things as flexible and as easy as possible for you folks. We always say you don't want to have to work for your platform. So kind of taking a step in that direction, making it just one less step or as seamless as possible for everyone who may be using Boxum. If you haven't used it already, I would encourage you to do so. But yeah, it's definitely exciting, and their team definitely is really dialed into similar mindset and kind of ideology around repricing and how products and platforms such as Aura and Boxum should continue to evolve in like the ever-changing space that we currently find ourselves in.
Yeah, it's an Angel. I do want to highlight this. We did release a fix for this, so that should be fixed for you. Don't feel like you, Casey, correct me if I'm wrong, Angel, you should not have to fix those yourself. We'll do that for you. So please don't take that work on yourself. we'll definitely get it corrected for you there. Yeah, it's funny you mentioning how things are changing so much. I just got off a call with pretty sizable Amazon seller, but also sells on Walmart, and we're kind of chatting on the Walmart front. And we were just kind of talking about how, gating on Amazon was crazy during Q4. It seems like it might be circling back a little bit more right now. We're starting to see a handful of brand gates, especially with the, what was the one today? Not Nike, it was a shoe one. I'm blanking. It's been a crazy day. And, we're kind of just asking each other questions around like, what are you seeing? And like, we're kind of brainstorming on these different patterns. And it kind of dawned on me, and I responded and said, you know what, just because something is behaving a certain way today on these platforms doesn't mean that they won't change tomorrow. And that has always been true. There is no, this change took effect, that's how it's going to be moving forward. Not really. Things just fluctuate so frequently. And that's why I think having that level of flexibility in your business makes a great deal of sense. but it's just interesting how many questions sellers have. And I was joking and stating, you'd think I would have a lot more answers having been in this space so long. And I feel like I have more questions than I do answers. And I feel like I have a lot of answers, which tells you how many questions I do have.
Yeah, and I think it's a space that changes so much and so frequently and rapidly that it's, even though we've been in the space for a while, all we can expect is the unexpected. We have to continually to adjust to whatever the new environment that we find ourselves in may be.
Yes.
So yeah, it is continuing to change, and yeah, I think brand gating is something that may be a little bit more frequent moving forward. I don't know what it looks like to get things ungated or things like that, but
Cool,
wouldn't
man.
be surprised if major brands continue to kind of impose those
Mhm.
restrictions so that consumers have to buy through them directly as opposed to having to get a markup through the reseller market.
And interestingly enough, the seller I was talking to noticed a pattern, and he was saying that the brands that he's seeing being gated more so than not are not massive, massive brands in terms of how many UPCs they have. So, if they have a few hundred, it seems like those are getting gated more so than those that have like a few thousand.
Mhm.
I don't know why that would be the case. I was trying to think before we jumped on here just about that comment and like, what, rationally speaking, why would that be the case? And I don't quite yet know. These are a lot of things I want to start diving into the data on, because a large portion of why I think sellers struggle is one person will see their account and notice a trend there and then extrapolate that out to everyone. And that's just, you can't do that in this space, unfortunately. You really have to look at a massive amount of data to be able to really see true patterns that are consistent. That's hard to do. Luckily, we're in a pretty good position to be able to do those kind of things. So, one thing I want to start doing a lot more of is diving into that data, seeing what those things are and sharing that. One aspect is, what categories are doing really well on Walmart right now? Well, I'm sure we could go look at some report that was done, but I want to look at our data. I want to see what we're seeing. And, because we'll have costs and stuff like that, I can say, hey, okay, from a sales perspective, from a revenue perspective, these are the top 5 categories. Well, what about margin? What about ROI? What about cost? Those kind of things. That tells a broader story than just which category has the most sales, right? Because shoes or clothes looks like a lot of sales, but you're not factoring in things like returns. And so you have to be able to take a step back and look at the broader picture. See Prince here. This is a good one. Have you guys talked about the recent algorithm change that favors FBM offers over FBA offers on most used media listings? Most FBA media sellers have seen their sales cut in half or more over the last 2 weeks. Okay. This recently came to my attention. I had a pretty big seller reach out. He texted me 2 nights ago and was asking like, hey, what are you guys noticing? I haven't personally noticed it. Casey, I'm curious to get your thoughts on it, at least in our system, but I have been hearing a lot more about this. And I think my theory is pretty simplistic, but I think it makes sense. Used media tends to have a longer turnover period. You're going to hold it a lot longer. Amazon's really trying to streamline the turnover stuff. They don't want things sitting there. They want their FBA fulfillment centers to be fulfillment centers, not storage. I can't speak. Storage centers. And so it makes sense. If you look at kind of what they've been prioritizing, it really feels like only a matter of time before they start looking at categories as a whole and changing the incentive model. That's what they're going to do. That's what's so interesting about these platforms. If they want you to behave a certain type of way, they're going to change the incentive. Easy way to do that, FBM gets priority over FBA. So now you're gonna operate in that light. That's my general theory. Again, will we ever know? Unless they explicitly tell us, maybe not. They tend not to. But again, if you just follow the incentive model, it kind of tells you how they're thinking.
Yeah, and I've seen a couple of users come in, not necessarily referring to a slowdown in sales, but more so loss of buy box ownership to FBM offers on listings such as that.
Yeah.
So obviously the only thing you can really do there is continue to drop your price, be a little bit more aggressive against the buy box in those scenarios. But yeah, I definitely agree, Dylan. I mean, we've talked about the implementation of long-term storage fees. That's why we really focused on releasing the age of inventory workflow to help you folks avoid that. But like you mentioned, I mean, used media does have a much longer turnover, and there's a lot of users that sell a large number of used items. So that's a higher number of items that sit there longer, and that's just not the type of behavior that Amazon is really incentivizing at this point. They're really trying to prioritize quick turnover, obviously low inventory fees, so they're potentially incentivizing or encouraging restocks on certain types of products and things of that nature. So really trying to get folks who may be selling used media to become more of an FBM seller. Probably just makes things easier on Amazon's end, but unfortunately doesn't make things easier for you folks. So definitely some adjustments there. Yeah, we don't know if this is going to be a permanent change, if this is temporary until they maybe free up enough storage space to encourage it again. Kind of one of those moving pieces that we're still trying to gain solid ground on. But we'll continue to look at this. And as always, if you do have any questions, have any findings, come into chat. We're more than happy to help. Or if you have any insight, definitely feel free to provide us with that as well. And that can help us kind of make some decisions moving forward on maybe some different things we can provide for you folks that'll be really impactful and help you in those scenarios.
Yeah, and kind of following that same line of thought with the turnover stuff. You know, again, the seller I was talking with before this does pretty well on Amazon, and we were just kind of chatting about risk profiles and how to de-risk and stuff like that. And he mentioned that he's going a lot shallower in his SKUs. And it's funny because back when I was a seller doing wholesale, a lot of the sellers at the time were ordering 3 months worth of inventory because you get a massive discount on the volume. And back then, holding inventory for 3 months wasn't the end of the world. Long-term storage fees didn't cut as much as they do today. Because I didn't have a ton of capital to get started, I did the complete opposite. I was doing POs every 2 weeks. So I wanted 2 weeks worth of inventory. I wanted a 2-week turnover. Now that's becoming more a best practice where you're placing higher frequency, smaller volume orders, especially on like the wholesale front. You can do this with OA as well. And you're just churning it super fast. That seems to be doing really well from the sellers I'm talking with about that. I think anything that's going to sit much or that has an average life cycle that's much longer than the average category is probably going to be pushed over to merchant fulfilled. Very much so. So let's see. Angel, are you guys able to add an option to the listing page to display the number of offers / sellers on the listing? This would help us identify listings where the offer count has increased, prompting us to activate Hyperdrive. This is cool. We have not talked about this, but I think that makes a lot of sense. I could even see, if you're familiar with Sparklines, I used to use that in Excel. It's a little line graph, little baby line graph, and you can basically show things over time. So it might be interesting to show the number of offers over a 7-day, 30-day period, and how that's trending. Is that trending up? Because, you know, if I'm thinking about it, it's not just how many are on now, it's kind of what's the trend, right? Is this trending up? That's a different discussion than it's just high and it's always been the same number, right? If it's always been 30 sellers, okay, nothing really changed. But if it went from 10 to 30, that's a whole different discussion. That's something we could definitely take a look at. I like that a lot. And yeah, if we have that data, we could use that as a trigger with an automated workflow.
Yeah, and that's not available like directly on the listings page right now, Angel. But if you go to the reports tab, I believe the reports buy box offers and active listings, I think is what it's referred to as. If you download that, that'll give you a breakdown of the number of FBM and FBA offers on each listing. So that'll help give you a sense of what that looks like right now. But as a reminder, that's not going to be like a fluent document. That'll just be based on when you do export that report. But that'll help give you an initial screenshot. And that's definitely actionable information that would make sense to have on the listings page. So yeah, I'm sure we can have that in internal discussions, maybe make an update for you sometime in the near future there.
Yeah. And also if you click into a specific SKU, you can go to the 3 dots in the top right, hit all offers, or just click the buy box value. That will bring up all offers. That will show you the same time snap or timestamp of how many offers are there, how many competitors, where are they at, all that stuff. Yeah. Same. You got it. Angel, you're on it. I appreciate it. Angel was there before we were. I dig that. Let's see, Floyd. Any specific strategies / workflows for ASINs that sell fast, but Amazon is also on the listing? Okay. This is my least favorite question. It's a great question, by the way. The reason why is Amazon behaves very differently on every single SKU. In some cases, they will allow you to compete and be totally fine. In other cases, you have to be more aggressive when competing to win the buy box. In other cases, no matter what you do, you're not pulling the buy box. So my answer, which sounds boring, is it depends. It really does depend on the SKU itself. What I would recommend, Floyd, is reach out to our support team, Casey or Finn, via that live chat in the bottom right corner of the page, and go ahead and just say, hey, here's the SKU. Let us take a look at what Amazon does, and then we'll be better positioned to tell you, okay, here's the kind of strategy we would recommend for this SKU and how Amazon's behaving on that particular SKU. I can't give broad stroke recommendations when Amazon's involved, unfortunately, just because it is so different SKU by SKU base.
Yeah, the one thing I would say there, Floyd, is if you're trying to win the buy box and Amazon's in the buy box, more often than not, you have to be more aggressive against Amazon compared to other folks when they're winning the buy box. So I would probably recommend a rules-based strategy. And then there is a section in the pursuit section where you can check if the buy box winner is Amazon reprice more aggressively. That being said, that specific margin is going to vary heavily from listing to listing. So that's where we can't give specific recommendations other than you'll just generally have to be more aggressive. We typically recommend 2 cents underneath the buy box is like a healthy margin to protect your own revenue stream or revenues margins on a listing, but also giving you a little bit of an edge over a typical seller. With Amazon, that can be anywhere from 5 cents to 25 cents. I've seen it be a couple dollars on a certain product as well.
Yeah,
so that's
I've
where it
seen
starts to get
$5.
Yeah, so
I've been able to
to
match them and rotate. I've been able to do it by a penny. I've been able to do it by 25 pennies. I've been able to do it with $3 to $5. So it's a massive range, which is crazy. One thing that comes to mind though that I would recommend you testing is applying Maven to it, because Maven will do a lot of that testing for you. So it will try and say, okay, I'm going to match you. Okay, Amazon's not rotating. Okay, let's try a penny. Did that rotate? No, let's keep going and see. So a lot of this nuanced stuff Maven handles for you because it will actually do the testing. So I would say probably, still reach out to support, because if we can give you a direct strategy that's just going to work from what we're seeing, I think that's going to be faster for you. But I would, in the meantime, test throwing Maven on it and see how that performs. All right, so let's switch gears here. I appreciate everybody, joining us again. I used to say this every time when we got started. Now we just kind of jump in because we're excited. This is open office hours, meaning there is no format. We're just here to geek out with you. We'll definitely fill any empty space with some stuff that we're thinking about. But we want to make sure that we can answer any questions that you guys have. That could be related to repricing, to Aura, to other stuff we're working on. Could just be regular seller questions. And if we don't have the answers, we probably know somebody who does, and we can recommend you that person. Just as a disclaimer, because I want to make sure everybody knows, don't wish your questions. We want the questions. We want to dive deep. Otherwise, we're just going to geek out. Okay, so just to kind of shift gears here. Walmart, making tons of progress. It's been very exciting. There is a lot of opportunity for sellers. But I think you have to approach it correctly. And talking with a lot of larger sellers, they've been asking me, when should a seller consider going multi-channel? My answer has changed over the years. I think it is inevitable that you will need to be multi-channel as a seller at some point. I think it's a lot earlier than a lot of people think, and I think it's a lot later than a lot of new sellers think. Here's my thought process on this. If you are struggling to source inventory for Amazon, you're also going to struggle to source inventory for Walmart. So there's a few dependencies here, I think. One, you have a business, because part of adding Walmart is de-risking the Amazon side, right? You get gated, great, move that inventory over. Where a lot of people get stuck is they don't factor in that, yes, there's a risk, but you don't have that risk yet. Meaning you don't have an asset yet. You don't remove risk that doesn't exist. So if you're doing a few grand a month on Amazon, I don't think that's the best time to jump over to Walmart. There is no risk. It's a few grand a month. You're maybe making a few $100. So like, it's not the end of the world. Now, I was going back and forth with a bunch of sellers, and we're trying to figure out, like, is it a dollar amount? Like, what is it? And I don't think there's a right answer. I think it kind of depends, but I think a good rule of thumb is, are you doing this full time? Right? If you're still working a job, then you've already de-risked quite a lot. If you're doing this full time and paying your bills, and you have a efficient process, and you're able to consistently source inventory, and you're consistently growing, I would then start to consider looking at going multi-channel. And this is true if you start on Walmart and want to expand over to Amazon, right? It's kind of go both ways. But a lot of sellers are seeing smaller sellers go multi-channel too early. And I agree with that. I think there is an issue in doing that too early, because you're adding a lot more workload. You're not really getting the de-risking factor, and you're not actually going to grow that much, which is counterintuitive. You're like, well, I'm adding a whole different sales channel. Correct. But if you weren't growing on Amazon, you can't just assume you're going to be growing on Walmart. It's still the same business fundamentals and foundations. And so if you've got those on any of these platforms, on a single platform, you can probably duplicate a lot of that with some subtle nuance changes to the other platform. Because what you don't want to do is try to start two separate businesses at the same time. And I think that's what a lot of the smaller sellers going multi-channel are actually doing and not realizing it. Instead, you want to just be in a position where you're adding a new sales channel. That's the kind of mindset you want. And I think that's hard for a lot of sellers right now. I think there's a lot of big sellers that are missing the opportunity because they're not going multi-channel. And I think there's some smaller sellers that are going multi-channel too early, and it's actually holding them back.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to process, right? Like if you're a large seller, you have your process pretty hammered out at that point. If you're making 100K, whatever, I'm not going to say arbitrary numbers that don't matter, but if you have your process flushed out and is effective and repeatable and continues to provide consistent results, that's the point where you can kind of segue into another area, because they are still different. There's still going to be different things that you're going to have to adjust in your process and different things to keep in mind when you do go multi-channel. But if you have your Amazon process or vice versa, your Walmart process already flushed out, then you can take on the extra work of optimizing a separate workflow. Yep. Whereas if you are still learning, kind of adjusting, hitting speed bumps, hitting roadblocks, whatever it may be, adding more work to that already existing workload is not something that I would recommend. You want to make sure you're at a point where it's kind of a well-oiled machine, and then you try to create a similar machine in a different ecosystem. But you don't want to be trying to grease the hinges on two separate machines that are operating in two different spaces and dealing with the problems that come with both.
Yeah, and how do I phrase this? If you already have consistent ways of sourcing inventory, how much easier is it for you to purchase more to sell on a different sales channel than to try and source for two separate platforms? That's the easiest route forward, right? Like you just go through your current catalog and say, okay, well, let me just see how they would do on Walmart. Okay, I'll increase my orders by 20%, and that 20% goes to Walmart. There's my growth. So it's really no real additional work outside of just doing that quick analysis. And a VA could do that relatively straightforward, I think. But if you're, again, struggling to get inventory for Walmart or for Amazon, it's going to be the same problem. So I think once you got that part figured out, I think you're in a good position. I think it's less about how big of an account you have, and it's more of what's your trajectory right now? Are you consistently growing? Have you figured out a lot of stuff Okay, that's a different story. So that's where I think a lot of people should be at. See, Robert. Hey guys, I'm fairly new seller. A couple months in with OA, I've used Aura right from the start. My question is, as a new seller with few SKUs, about 12, and lower stock, up to 20 units each, it seems that maybe the AI takes some time to learn the listing to run optimally. How/when or why would I use rule-based strategies over using the AI model, or should I still use the AI strategy? Lots to learn still. Thank you. Yeah, it is a lot to learn. Let me give you our model for how to think about this in a broader way. Every SKU you have is in a different phase of the same life cycle, and every one of your competitors is in the same kind of scenario. This life cycle works this way. When you first come into stock, you're going to be pretty conservative with your price because you haven't held it long, capital hasn't been tied up too long, long-term storage fees aren't a problem. You want to maximize your profit margin. As time goes on through this life cycle, you want to become more aggressive in your strategy. Why? Because of the same things I just mentioned. Now you have capital tied up. Now you have long-term storage fees you need to factor in. It can affect your metrics, all kinds of stuff. So the way to break down when to use AI versus when not to, very simple. This life cycle has 3 distinct phases. Phase 1, that conservative area, that's where you want to use Maven. As time goes, because it's going to maximize profit margin, that's its whole thing, right? As time goes on, we want to become more aggressive. And phase 2 is where we go to our rule-based strategies. And this one, we're going to target the buy box itself directly. This allows a little bit more aggressiveness without being overly aggressive. And then phase 3 is liquidation. That's our most aggressive we want. And if you go to help.goaura.com, search 3 core strategies, we break down each of these 3. So it's less about when in general and more so what's the process here. And you want to think through, okay, well, for each of my SKUs, which phase am I in? And you transition through these phases based on time. Every seller is slightly different. Some sellers want to become more aggressive after 10 days. Some want to do it after 90 days. Totally depends on you. I would argue that if you're a new seller and you have limited capital, you need to be more liquid. So I would compress that down. I would probably do that within 60 days, the whole life cycle. As you're more cash flush, you can do that a little bit longer. You want to think about the opportunity cost of your capital. Can you sell it at a lower ROI right now and then redeploy it immediately and keep that going? Okay, you should probably do that relatively fast. If the opportunity of you selling that item right now is you cannot purchase, you don't have anything you can purchase that's at least equal profitability, you probably should hold it a little bit longer. So it kind of depends on where you're at. That's how we think about AI versus rule-based. It's not that one is better than the other. It comes down to what are you attempting to achieve, and then what's the best strategy to achieve that outcome in that moment. So you'll hear a lot of people say AI is just better. It's not true. AI is better depending on the outcome you want. Because at the end of the day, these strategies are designed with an outcome in mind. So no one strategy is better than another. It comes down to what are we trying to achieve here?
Yeah, exactly. Like AI tools in all spaces are designed, like you said, for a specific outcome. And if that's not your desired outcome, then it's not going to work effectively.
Right.
Robert, I did just post that article in that chat there. So if you copy that URL, that'll bring you right to that Core 3 Strategies
Awesome.
article for you as well. But yeah, so Maven is going to take in a lot of different factors, everything from previous sales data to current offers to the buy box data. And that's going to be what helps inform its decisions. Just to touch upon one thing that you mentioned, does it take time for Maven to learn on a listing? The answer is definitely yes. Any listing that has a high number of sellers, a high number of pricing activity, where there's a lot of movement on that listing, Maven's going to become more intelligent more quickly on that listing compared to a listing where you may be one of 2 or 3 sellers where there's not a lot of movement, just because it's going to have less data to actually take in to inform its decisions moving forward. So just wanted to point that out as well. But yeah, we recommend kind of becoming more aggressive as time goes on. If you want to compress that timeline, we generally recommend 30 bucket or 30-day buckets, if you will. So starting with Maven for 30, then buy box targeting, and then ending with liquidation. You can obviously compress that as well if you'd like. And Maven is designed to try to win that buy box, but it does also focus specifically on profitability and sales velocity as well. So it's not only focused on winning the buy box. So if you are only focused on winning the buy box, you'll want to use the buy box targeting strategy. Otherwise, if you're just trying to get as much profit out of a listing, I would definitely recommend starting with Maven and then segueing to the buy box when you need to be a little bit more aggressive there.
Yeah. Nice. Great question, by the way. Especially when you're a new seller, this stuff is very overwhelming. So instead of just, saying, hey, here's a strategy you need, it's more so, can we teach you how to think about it? And then you have that foundational knowledge to be able to make any kind of tweaks you want. Because having been a personal trainer, one of my biggest things was, I don't want you to be reliant on me. I want to teach you so that you can do it yourself. It's the whole, give a man a fish versus teach a man a fish kind of thing, right? Like, we want to teach you how to fish. We're always here if you ever need us, but we don't want you to have to need us, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Self-sufficiency is always great in every aspect.
Exactly. It was funny because I was chatting with a group of sellers, and they were relatively new, and they're like, I'm sick of watching tutorial videos. Like, it's been 6 months of just nonstop. And can you just do it for me? Yeah, 1,000%. And they're like, oh, thank God. They're like, I'm just burnt out on this fire hose of information. And a lot of it is how to use this one tool. And he's like, I'm learning how to use the stuff in such a slow pace that I'm not actually utilizing it. I'm like, yeah, I've been a seller. I know exactly how that feels. And it is so frustrating. So we're always here if you need us. And if you need us to help do things for you, we got you guys. I know a lot of times, especially if you're working full time and trying to get this up and running, you don't have a lot of time, and your time is best spent sourcing. And so we're always down to help do things for you guys, whether that's adding a strategy, looking at something for you guys, explaining best practices, whatever. We're always here to do that for you guys.
Yeah, and we kind of take that methodology with our help doc area / ecosystem as a whole. We're going to show you how to do things, but also why you should do them a certain way. We're not telling you exactly how to run your business, but more so at a high level, giving you different ways to think about things from, different theories about specifically that core 3 strategies. One was really focused on becoming more aggressive to avoid long-term storage fees when Amazon really started to implement those. So trying to highlight some things that may not be top of mind, but do make a big difference in helping you adjust to those accordingly, making sure that you're setting up, whether it's a specific listing or a specific strategy for the best results, taking into account everything that may be going on for your specific business as well.
Yeah. And I like being a why guy. Like, don't just tell me to do something. Why that way? Like, can you explain? Because I want to understand the reasons behind the recommendations, not just here's best practices. Well, why? And so we try to write those articles, and anytime we're doing this kind of stuff, it's to get you to understand the why behind it, not just us up, preaching, here's what you do. It's like, okay, cool. But I still don't understand. Like, why does that matter? When does it not matter? So we try to be very, very, can't think of words today. Just educative.
Yeah.
It's been a long day. I'm on my 3rd Red Bull, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of caffeine being consumed in the office to make sure we're keeping up with everything going on. But yeah, taking that educational standpoint, I mean, like we talk about, the landscape is forever changing. And when we try to teach you concepts as opposed to just processes, you can apply those concepts as the processes themselves change. They inherently will change. Yeah. Amazon always loves to throw curveballs. It'll be interesting once we get more involved with Walmart to see what that looks like and the kind of curveballs they start throwing our way. So it is always a little bit of a dance, and we're just trying to make sure you know how to dance to different types of music.
Ooh, that was good. Oh,
yeah.
Casey's on it today.
That was the second coffee right there that got me.
It just kicked
huge.
in.
Yeah.
Oh, we got to use that in marketing copy. I dig that. We teach you how to dance to different songs. Okay. All right. Changing it up on me, man. That caught me off guard. That was good.
Every now and then I'll get you.
Yeah, it's this whole conversation around multi-channel is, I think, frustrating a lot of sellers because they're already slightly overwhelmed, and now they're kind of being pushed to sell on two different platforms, and there are subtle differences, of course.
Mhm.
There always will be. And I think sellers are struggling to find that balance. I think they're struggling to find a way to hold those together in such a way that it's not necessarily double the work. And I've said this before, but you're going to have to lean on software for this. And I don't think there's a lot being built that I know of. There's a lot of things in stealth, I assume, that are trying to solve that problem directly, right? It's frustrating when, and we've seen this a lot in the Amazon space, right? The branding of the software is AMZ or Amazon, very specific, right? And that's worked for, decade and a half. But now that the industry is shifting, a lot of these softwares that were not built to consider multi-channel platforms really can't do it. I mean, it's a whole re-architecture, which is a massive project. I mean, that could take a year plus to do and tons of money, hundreds of thousands, if not millions to do. And I think that opens up a door for new developers to come in and think through, how do we build software that is also flexible itself, right? We're telling sellers, you gotta be adaptable, you gotta be flexible, you gotta be willing to, change out sales channels and add new ones. And okay, sure, but what about the software? Can it also do that? Can it adapt with me as I'm having to adapt myself? And a lot are just not able to do that. And so we're going to see a lot of software either shut down or just completely plateau. I really do believe that. So being multi-channel is just a requirement moving forward because of what you're just talking about. Like, things are just going to change, and there's things that are going to change that we can never predict. So how do you build things with that flexibility in mind? Not knowing what, just knowing that it could. And that's a lot of what we did when we launched 1.0. 1.0 was a massive change across the board, but a big portion of that nobody saw, was being able to support multi-channel and to say, we see where this is going. And when it shifts, we'll be easily able to add that and it not be a big problem. And I mean, listen, it happens slow and then all at once. Walmart's been around for a while. And it wasn't until the big Section 3 travesty of 2024 and Q4 where the sentiment, the perspective of Amazon sellers changed what felt like in 1 week. I mean, the hammer came down. Everybody said, I'm going to pause and reassess, and we're going to figure this out moving forward. And that happened at a very, very large scale. So I think a lot of developers have been like, yeah, we'll get to that. And now they're like, oh, crap, if we don't, it's a problem. I mean, it called us off guard, just the speed. We had already planned on working on it, but we're like, oh, did not see Amazon coming out with that much firepower during Q4 of all time. And I think a lot of developers, a lot of software companies right now are kind of scrambling to figure out if they can even support doing what they do best on multiple platforms.
Right. And like you said, I mean, Amazon still continues to take the lion's share of the market, somewhere around, I think, what have we talked about, 80, 75%, something like that, probably higher.
It's a massive amount.
Right. And as we've also discussed, Walmart has continued to grab a slightly higher share of the market over the last few years, but really hasn't made a massive dent into Amazon's ownership of that space. So with Amazon really being overly aggressive in the most successful time of the year, sellers are now being forced to either, hey, I go multi-channel, or do I even continue running my business? Thankfully, we are set up to be able to adjust and work with other platforms. Walmart's just the example here, but there's a lot of companies out there that were more so focused, hey, Amazon's 90% of the market, we don't have to worry about anyone else. And then may or may not be pigeonholed moving forward, not being able to architecturally create functionality with another platform without going back to square one. So Yeah, I mean, we always talk about it changing. That change in Q4 was as rapid as they come and
Yeah.
has made everybody from obviously us on this side of the table, you folks as sellers as a whole, really assess what's most effective, what makes the most sense, how am I going to continue to move forward if I move forward at all. But thankfully, we are equipped to support you folks as this does continue to change and as it becomes more multi-channel. So yeah, if there's any feature requests, I do want to emphasize that as we continue to, look for new integrations, look for better
Yeah.
ways to serve you folks. Always go to, was it feedback.goaura.com?
Yep.
That's a great place to submit feature requests. You can look at already submitted feature requests, upvote any ones that may be may have a positive impact for you as well. Any feature requests that have higher voter counts, that's going to be prioritized by our team, naturally knowing it's going to help more folks. But that's just a great way to help give us direction and also help us provide a better platform for you in any way possible there.
Yeah. I was looking at some data. I think it was it's either 2020 or 2022. I think it was 2022. The annual growth rate for sellers on Walmart was 60%. Now we're talking small numbers, right? We're talking like 150K sellers versus like Amazon's many millions, right? Amazon's adding millions per year still. So that number is going to decrease over time. But if you extrapolate that out and just assume the 60% stays constant, they're probably around 250,000 sellers right now. The growth rate of sellers is very high. The amount of effort Walmart is putting into the consumer side is very high. So you could see this, becoming taking over a lot of the market share over time. Is Amazon probably still going to hold the vast majority of that? Yeah, I think for a while. They do have a bit of a moat to a degree, but still, I mean, getting 30, 40% taken away from Amazon would be a massive disruptor to our space. LaWayne has something I never thought about this, but it makes a lot of sense. LaWayne has a conspiracy theory that Amazon did all the Section 3 and starting again to force sellers to competition or competitors like Walmart to have a better case against the FTC claims. So basically, there's some FTC claims about Amazon being a monopoly, and I like this conspiracy. I dig this. This is believable enough, LaWayne. I really dig this. Would a company that large intentionally create some internal disruption to shift some of the market share enough to avoid these lawsuits and FTC claims? Maybe. I don't know. I've never been in that big of a company, but I could see somebody at some board meeting be like, "Hey, listen, I got an idea. Well, all right, we're in trouble because we have whatever percentage of market share. What if we just like intentionally gave up 10%?
If you take that into account on top of the lawsuit settlements last year, they know that they've got a number of high risk sellers as well. So if they're like, if we're overly aggressive, people will either leave and not come back, or these people will verify that they are legitimate, in which case we'd love to have them stay on. So the logic there definitely makes sense. Yeah, exactly.
It could be cheaper to deal with this headache as a company than the ongoing legal battles, which will cost millions and millions of dollars a year. Crazy. Yeah, this now I want to know if this is real. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's a good one, LaWayne. I never really thought about it from that perspective, but now that I could definitely see that being a possibility. I'm not gonna say it's true. I can see it being a possibility.
It would make sense.
Which, if we follow this line of thought, that means that at some point they will stop doing that. Because it's a short-term thing, right? Like, let's just disrupt it a little bit enough and we get back to business as usual. So if this is true, or some version of it is true, that does mean that there's a light at the end of the tunnel if we follow that line of thought. Very interesting. So all the sellers jumping from Amazon to Walmart wholesale, just 100% going over here, This is why this is a good reason why I don't agree with that. Things can change. Just because it's troublesome now doesn't mean it's going to be in the future. And do you really want to have to restart all over again on Amazon, or just kind of deal with the troublesome situation short term? And short term could be a year, it could be 2 years, who knows? But then when it bounces back, you're already well positioned. And this is the thing, right? We talk a lot about reducing risk against Amazon. Totally. But what we really don't talk a lot about, and I think we should, is what happens when that reverses, right? I like the whole the Hydra concept, right? Cut one head off, two come back. I like this anti-fragile kind of concept of, we don't know how things are going to play out. We can't predict it. We just don't. So how do we make it so that we're as flexible as a company as possible, so that we can take advantage of the upside, but we can reduce the downside effects that we have? That's asymmetric. That's a good thing. You really want to be playing asymmetrical games where the upside is much greater than the downside. If you've ever played poker, this got big, I don't know, half a decade ago. Having a positive EV calculation, expected value. Expected value is basically, okay, well, what happens if it goes well? What's the payout? $1,000. What's the probability? Okay, 80%. What's the downside? I lose $300. Okay, probability is 20%. Run the calculation. Is the number positive? That is considered a positive expected value situation. Doesn't mean you're going to win. It just means that on average, if you keep playing enough, you will win. Same concept, man. Exact same concept of just, can I structure the business to be positive EV? That's where you want to be at here. And I'm glad, Luane, you brought this up, because now I have a way better analogy for how to explain my thoughts on this portfolio approach, because I've yet to have a really succinct way of explaining this to people that made sense and had a deeper basis for why I'm saying what I'm saying. And you just helped me get there, so I appreciate that. I need some more conspiracies related to selling and Amazon, because this is, it's funny. I was talking with somebody a year ago, and I was like, it would be really cool if we had like an Amazon seller thriller movie, like a fake documentary that's actually like a thriller movie, but it has to do with like selling. It sounds stupid, but it would just be cool. I don't know.
What was that show on Netflix, American Vandals or something? It was like a
Yeah.
fake spoof documentary show. Yeah.
I was
documentary now.
I was watching a documentary on Amazon. Thought it was a documentary the whole time. And then something happened in the film. I was like, there's no way they got this footage. It is like, I immediately stood up, was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And then I finished it. And at one point, there's the way they filmed it, I was like, that's not real. And then I backed out, and it was like documentary-based fictional thriller. I was like, oh man, I was so excited. I was telling James about it. He's like, oh, are you talking about this movie? I was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, it's not real. I was like, oh my God. I was so excited. So excited.
There was Bill Hader and Fred Armisen, the two guys that used to be on SNL together. They're both off SNL now. They did a TV show called Documentary Now, and it's just 30-minute episodes, but each one's a fake documentary. And they have one on like a fake band in California that was like coming out during like the Eagles and the Beach Boys, and they get like real artists to do like interview cams and stuff. There's one about like a fake Michelin star restaurant, like at the top of a mountain, and like all this stuff. There's some funny episodes of that. But yeah, the mockumentary style, I feel like, has become researched in popularity over the last couple of years. There's been some really funny ones.
Yeah, usually I can see it from a mile away. This one got me.
How'd you go in there for a minute?
Yeah, I was going down the rabbit hole. I was like trying to look up, like they were mentioning this dude had a blog. I was like, I gotta go read it. It was really good. Oh yeah, Robert, this is great. Listing suppression, the horror. That's what we should do. We should do a fake documentary that's just so obviously funny, but it has to do with like listing deactivations and stuff like that. like we built up a lot of suspense, and then it's just like a listing suppression. That's what we need. See, this is why I like doing these kind of things. We can have fun with you guys. We can geek out, and it doesn't have to all be business. I appreciate that. Awesome. So we got about 10 minutes left here. Any last minute questions, anything that we can dive into, help answer any questions you guys have. I know a lot of people are on right now that were not on when we first kicked this off, but we did announce our 4th integration today with Boxum. So we're very excited about that. Our big thing as a company is we want to make sure that we're helping to build and support a open ecosystem, meaning you don't have just one option. Every software is slightly different, and you're going to find the one that works best for you. And what's really frustrating being a user of software is when I find the thing that I'm like, this is exactly what I wanted, and it doesn't integrate with all the other things that I have. And now I have a bad decision, which is, do I take a software that I really doesn't hit everything that I want, but does integrate, or do I just deal with the non-integration? And either way, I'm choosing some kind of pain. I don't want you guys to have to choose pain. I want you to say, that works for me. This one works for me. They all integrate. We're good to go here. So very exciting. I remember getting our first integration forever ago, and it was the coolest thing ever. So exciting. And now we have our 4th, which is great. We're looking at other platforms to integrate with as well, just to keep that open ecosystem moving. I think that's really how our industry should operate. It's how broader tech companies do operate. They might have 100 integration partners, and it's just whatever you already use, like whatever you already love. And you're not hampered by that. So we're hoping we can kind of set the standard for integrations in our space, which has historically not been integration friendly. It's been a lot of like, no, we're not interested. We're hoping we can start to change that perspective with developers and say, hey, listen, there's a lot of added value in connecting this software with that software. And let's just make it easier to be a seller moving forward. So it's good stuff. Very excited.
Yeah, it's always fun to plug and play with things you're already using, just making things easier for you. Like I mentioned earlier, the feature request / feedback, if there's any platforms you guys are using that you think a lot of other folks may be using that you'd like us to integrate with, definitely post that. Give us some context as to why that integration would be helpful for you as well. That always helps kind of point us in the right direction, whether it be design or specific functionality or things like that. But yeah, it's definitely exciting to continue to loop in more corners of the space and different platforms that previously may have been a barrier to entry for a lot of folks.
Yeah, if you think about this, a lot of the softwares that are not integrating are creating data silos, right? You have all this data here that's great, and data by itself is a great thing, but there's something magic that happens when you take this data, combine it with this data. Now you can get better answers. You can do more things with that. And so by having and building this open ecosystem, we're able to enable new functionalities, new things that otherwise would not be possible, because you need both functionalities of each software to make that work. So it's very exciting. And we got some more stuff coming y'all's way too, which is going to be even bigger, which is going to be awesome. So awesome. So it looks like there's no additional questions. If we'll hang out here for a minute or so, and then we might wrap up here for time. But if there is any last minute questions, we'd love to answer those for you guys and make the most of the time you guys have with us.
Also, always in chat from 9 to 5. That's when our live chat is. You can always expect a first response in less than 10 minutes during those business hours, Monday through Friday. So come in and chat. More often, it's me running that. Happy to give you guys a hand, whether it's concept questions, setup questions, specific listing questions. Always happy to help. Finn's running that right now. He's occasionally covering that, depending on if I'm working on different projects, maybe recording some videos for you folks. And that does make me think if there's any gaps in our documentation, our processes, or our setup articles, anything like that, definitely let us know. And on top of that, I am working on providing more video content in those documents. If there's a specific document that is 80% clear, but you think that video might get it to the finish line, let us know. I can try to prioritize making certain videos and things that are going to be most helpful for you guys.
Awesome. Cool. So we're going to wrap up here for time. We do this every Wednesday from 2 to 3 p.m. EST. It's open office hours, meaning there is no format. We might jump on here and geek out with some latest news or our thought process or brainstorm some different things. But fundamentally, this is an hour-long session to be able to answer any questions that you guys have, as broad as they may be, as narrow as they may be. It doesn't matter. We just want to make sure that we're providing as much value to you guys as possible in different formats. So we'd love to have you come again next week, and thank you for making the time, and we will see you guys next week. Enjoy it.
Adios, folks.